A racist cop sees a well-built black man and immediately assumes he is a criminal or a threat. Using his badge as a weapon, he tries to intimidate and publicly humiliate him. What he doesn't realize is that this man is a highly trained Navy SEAL, someone who has spent his life serving the very country the cop claims to protect. As the confrontation escalates, the SEAL calmly dismantles the officer's authority, exposing his prejudice and teaching him a lesson in respect and humility. The difference between power and control: some people earn it, others abuse it. A busy city sidewalk, Darius King steps out of a convenience store, his broad shoulders relaxed, a cold bottle of water in his hand. The sun reflects off glass buildings, pedestrians weave through traffic, and the distant honk of a car horn fills the air. Everything feels normal, until it doesn't. A police cruiser suddenly swerves to the curb, tires screeching. Darius doesn't flinch. He simply takes another sip of water, his sharp eyes flicking toward the approaching officer. He's seen this before. He already knows how this will go. Officer Bradley Cooper steps out, his fingers grazing his holster, eyes locked onto Darius like a predator sizing up its prey. "What are you up to?" he barks, suspicion dripping from his tone. Darius exhales slowly. He could end this in seconds, but not yet. What happens when a racist cop picks the wrong man to harass? You won't believe how this one ends. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Darius King stood outside the convenience store, water bottle in hand, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun on his skin. He wasn't just any man walking down the street. He was a highly trained Navy SEAL, a warrior who had faced some of the most dangerous situations imaginable. But to the world, to strangers who didn't know his story, all they saw was his build, his skin, their own assumptions. His broad shoulders, muscular frame, and confident stride often made people wary, but he had long since stopped trying to control how others perceived him. He knew the weight of his service, the years of sacrifice, the countless missions he had endured to protect the freedoms of the very country he now walked through. The irony: some of the very people he had fought for would never see him as a hero, only a threat. He unscrewed the cap of his water bottle, took a sip, and glanced toward the street, just in time to see the police cruiser slow down. His jaw tightened ever so slightly, but outwardly he remained calm. He had seen this before, too many times. The slow roll of the car, the assessing gaze from the driver's seat, the way the officer's eyes didn't scan the street for trouble, but locked onto him. Officer Bradley Cooper had been with the force for years, but his career was built on fear, not justice. He thrived on intimidation, on the absolute power of his badge and gun. He saw himself as the law, believing that people, especially black men, should always submit without question. A man like Cooper didn't care about right or wrong. He cared about control. And right now, as his fingers tapped lightly against the wheel, his eyes locked onto Darius, he had already decided this was his next target. The city around them moved on, oblivious. A woman pushed a stroller past the coffee shop across the street. A man in a suit hurried through the intersection, phone pressed to his ear. A couple laughed as they held hands walking toward a row of small boutiques. No one noticed the moment. Tension crept into the air. Darius could have walked away. He could have ignored the burning gaze of the officer watching him, waiting for an excuse. But today would be different. He took another sip of his water, exhaled slowly, and kept Walking. The police cruiser swerved suddenly, tires screeching against the pavement. Darius didn't flinch. He already knew what was coming. The police cruiser came to a sharp stop, its tires screeching against the pavement. The sound cut through the usual hum of the city, turning a few heads, but most people kept moving, unaware of the storm brewing. Darius kept walking, his steps steady, his expression unreadable. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to act afraid. He had faced enemy fire, impossible odds, and near-death experiences, and yet he knew this moment could be just as dangerous. The car door slammed shut. "Hey," the sharp voice carried, across the sidewalk. Officer Bradley Cooper stomped toward him, heavy boots hitting the pavement with purpose. His entire demeanor screamed aggression. The puffed-up chest, the squared shoulders, the way his hand hovered a little too close to his holster. Darius stopped, turning slowly, keeping his hands at his sides. His face was calm, but his muscles were already coiled, ready. Cooper stood a few feet away, his narrowed eyes scanning Darius from head to toe. "Where are you coming from?" Darius raised an eyebrow. His voice was smooth, controlled. "Is there a problem, officer?" Cooper's nostrils flared. "You looked suspicious coming out of that store. Thought I'd check things out." Darius let out a slow breath. Suspicious? He had paid for a bottle of water and walked out. That was all it took. Behind him, a woman walking her dog slowed down slightly, glancing at the unfolding scene. A man across the street, waiting at the crosswalk, tilted his head, watching but pretending not to stare. A few more people suddenly reached for their phones. Darius had seen it before. The moment when people realized something was off. Some would watch. Others would pretend nothing was happening. But Cooper didn't care about the eyes on him. He had his target. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, stepping forward. Darius held his ground. "I haven't done anything. Don't argue with me." Before Darius could say another word, Cooper shoved him, hard, against the brick wall of the store. The impact sent a jolt through Darius's back, but he remained still, letting his training take over. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. A man holding a shopping bag pulled out his phone, angling it toward the scene. Another woman whispered to her friend. People were watching now. Cooper didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. Rough. Hands patted down Darius's sides, checking for weapons, treating him like a criminal. His breathing remained steady, but his jaw tightened slightly. He could take this man down in seconds. He had disarmed terrorists, broken through enemy lines, survived the impossible. And yet, here he was, being searched like some common thug. Darius inhaled deeply, keeping his patience intact. Then, in a low, even voice, he finally spoke. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" Officer Bradley Cooper smirked, his grip tightening slightly on Darius's arm. He thought he had control. He thought he had power. "I don't care who you are," he sneered. "I'm in charge here." Darius met his gaze, his expression unreadable. He could see it clearly now. This wasn't about law, it wasn't about justice. It was about control. About a man who had spent too long using his badge as a weapon. Darius exhaled, his voice low, deliberate. "You think your badge makes you powerful?" Cooper's smirk twitched slightly as if he hadn't expected resistance. "You're resisting an officer of the law," Cooper snapped, trying to reassert dominance. Darius remained still, but his next words sliced through the moment, like a blade. "What's my crime, officer? What law did I break?" The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The crowd around them had grown larger. More people had their phones out now, recording everything. There was no way this moment would disappear. Cooper's eyes flicked to the gathering crowd for a brief second. He saw them, but he wasn't backing down. "I told you, you were acting suspiciously," he growled, his frustration showing. Darius tilted his head slightly. "So, buying water is suspicious now?" Cooper's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't have to explain myself to you." Darius chuckled softly. "That's where you're wrong." The shift in power had started. The control Cooper thought he had was slipping, and everyone watching could feel it. Then Cooper made his biggest mistake. His temper flared, his authority questioned in front of too many people. He lunged forward, grabbing Darius's wrist, trying to force him down. It happened in a blur. Darius moved instinctively, effortlessly. With a swift, practiced motion, he twisted his wrist free, spun his body, and reversed the hold. In a split second, Cooper found himself off balance, his own arm bent at an uncomfortable angle. His body tensed in shock, his breath catching as he realized he was no longer in control. The crowd gasped. A woman near the back covered her mouth. Someone let out a low whistle. Cooper struggled slightly, but Darius didn't apply unnecessary force. He didn't need to. He just needed to make a point. Then, with perfect composure, Darius reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small leather case. He flipped it open, revealing his military ID. The gold emblem caught the light, unmistakable, undeniable. "You just tried to arrest a decorated U.S. Navy SEAL." Silence. A deep, crushing silence fell over the entire street. Cooper's face drained of color. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. He had nothing to say. The crowd, once whispering, was now staring in stunned disbelief. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh, damn." Another voice, louder this time, said, "He messed with the wrong one." Darius let go of Cooper's arm and took a slow step back. His stance was relaxed, but his presence was commanding. The moment of truth had arrived. Cooper could no longer hide behind his badge. He could no longer use his authority as a shield, because now everyone knew who the real protector was. The weight of the moment pressed down on Officer Bradley Cooper, his once confident stance now unsteady. The arrogance that had fueled his every word, every action, had vanished in an instant. His grip on power, on the control he thought he had, was slipping through his fingers like sand, and the whole world was watching. Darius King stood firm, his posture unwavering, his Navy SEAL ID still in hand. His presence alone commanded respect, not because of any badge or authority, but because of the strength, discipline, and sacrifice he had made for his country. And yet, here he was, being treated as a common criminal simply because of one man's assumption. Darius didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger, but his words cut deeper than any outburst ever could. "I've defended this country for men like you, and this is how you treat me?" Cooper's eyes flickered with something unfamiliar. Shame. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He had spent his entire career playing the role of the aggressor, the man in charge, the one people feared. But now, faced with a truth he could no longer deny, he looked small. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice stripped of its former dominance. The certainty he once carried had evaporated, replaced with desperation. His hands twitched. At his sides, his fingers curling and uncurling as if grasping for a lifeline. Darius tilted his head slightly, studying the man before him. There was no satisfaction in seeing the fear in Cooper's eyes, only a familiar exhaustion. "And that's the problem, isn't it?" Darius said, his voice smooth, deliberate. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People exchanged knowing glances, shaking their heads. The ones who had been recording angled their phones to make sure every second of this was captured. He only cares now because he got caught. This is what they always do. Act tough until they realize they messed up. Imagine how many people he's done this to who couldn't fight back. The words came from different voices, different corners of the crowd. The shift was undeniable now. Cooper was no longer the man in charge. He was the one being judged. And then the crowd parted slightly as a new presence stepped into the scene. A second patrol car had arrived, its blue and red lights flashing faintly in the daylight. The door swung open, and out stepped Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, a seasoned officer with salt and pepper hair, a sharp gaze, and the unmistakable air of someone who commanded real respect. Unlike Cooper, his uniform wasn't a tool of intimidation. It was a symbol of duty. The moment his eyes landed on Darius, his expression shifted, not with suspicion, but with recognition. His brows lifted slightly, his posture straightening, as realization dawned. "Commander King?" Reynolds' voice carried over the crowd, and just like that, another shift rippled through the spectators. Cooper's face turned ghostly pale. His head snapped toward Reynolds, confusion flickering across his face. "Wait. What?" Reynolds didn't answer. His focus remained on Darius. He took a few measured steps forward, his gaze scanning the tension in the air, the eyes of the onlookers. The phone still raised, capturing every second of Cooper's humiliation. Darius exhaled slowly, slipping his ID back into his pocket. "Afternoon, Lieutenant," he said, his voice composed, unreadable. Reynolds gave a single nod, the respect evident in his tone. "I had no idea you were back in town, sir." The weight of that single word, GTE, sir, hung in the air like a bombshell. A few gasps came from the crowd. Even those unfamiliar with military ranks knew what that meant. "Sir," the man that Cooper had treated like a criminal, the man he had tried to bully and humiliate in front of a crowd, wasn't just a Navy SEAL. He wasn't just a veteran. He was a high-ranking officer, someone even the police addressed with respect, and Cooper, he had just assaulted him in public. The blood drained from Cooper's face. His body stiffened, his mouth opening and closing as if his brain was scrambling for a way to salvage what little was left of his authority. But there was nothing to salvage. He had lost. And Darius wasn't finished. Taking a slow step forward, he locked eyes with Cooper, his voice steady, razor sharp. "The difference between you and me?" Cooper swallowed hard, his hands still, twitching at his sides. He had no response, no excuse, no way out. Darius let the silence stretch before delivering the final blow. "I earned my title." His words were like steel, unbreakable. "You hide behind yours." A collective hush fell over the crowd. Cooper's jaw clenched, his face burning with humiliation. For the first time in his life, he had no power, because now everyone knew the truth. A heavy silence hung in the air, thick with tension, as Officer Bradley Cooper stood frozen, his face drained of all color. The weight of the moment had settled on his shoulders, and he knew there was no coming back from this. The power he once wielded so easily had slipped through his fingers, and now he was the one being judged. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds stepped forward, his sharp eyes assessing the situation. He had seen enough. He turned his gaze toward Cooper, his voice firm but controlled. "Officer Cooper, we'll discuss this at the station. Hand over your badge and gun." Cooper's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, sir." "Now," Reynolds ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. For a moment, Cooper hesitated, his fingers hovering near his belt. He wasn't ready to let go. He had spent years operating with unchecked authority, using his badge as a tool of power rather than protection. And now, in front of a crowd, in front of a man he had underestimated, he was being stripped of it. But he had no choice. With a shaking hand, he unclipped his badge and set it in Reynolds' outstretched palm. His gun followed. The crowd murmured, some whispering, others shaking their heads. Reynolds sighed, his expression unreadable. "You're on administrative leave pending an investigation." Cooper flinched at the words. He knew what that meant. He had seen it before. Officers who got caught on camera, who made the wrong decision at the wrong time. Some recovered. Most didn't. As Reynolds turned back to Darius, the contrast between the two men was stark. One had spent years abusing his position. The other had spent years earning his. Darius held his ground, his stance strong but calm, his presence undeniable. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. This wasn't a victory. It was simply the truth coming to light. He turned toward the crowd, letting his gaze sweep across. The dozens of faces watching, waiting. Some had their phones still raised, capturing every moment. Others looked shaken, thoughtful. Some looked angry. Darius took a slow breath before speaking. "This isn't just about one cop," he said, his voice steady, clear. "This is about power, and who gets to abuse it." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some nodded in agreement. Others spoke quietly to each other. A woman near the front stepped forward, slightly. "I've seen this happen before," she said, her voice shaking. "Not like this." She gestured toward Cooper, still standing in stunned silence. "But I've seen officers do this to my brothers, to my father." She shook her head. "They never thought anyone would fight back." A man in a suit crossed his arms. "He didn't even care until he found out who you were." His voice was laced with frustration, exhaustion. Another voice cut through the crowd. "How many people has he done this to who weren't recording?" That was the question hanging over it. Them all? Cooper had been caught today, but how many times had he walked away with no consequences? How many men like him were still out there, using their badge as a shield for their own prejudice? Someone started clapping, then another, and another. The sound built up, rolling through the crowd, not just for Darius, but for the truth of what had just happened, for the reality that had been exposed. Across the street, a news van pulled up. A reporter and her cameraman jumped out, scanning the scene. They had heard the chatter, seen the viral videos spreading within minutes. The world was already talking about it. Darius saw them approaching but didn't react. He didn't need attention. He didn't need validation. He had done what he always did, handled the situation with discipline and control. He turned back to Reynolds and nodded once. "Take care of it, Lieutenant." Reynolds, a man who understood what real leadership looked like, returned the nod. "We will, sir." And with that, Darius turned and walked away. He didn't need to see what happened next. The headlines, the debates, the video clips dissected on national television. None of it mattered to him, because at the end of the day, he hadn't done this to prove a point. He had done it because it was right. As Darius King walked away, the weight of the moment still lingered in the air. Officer Bradley Cooper stood frozen, his career, his reputation, and everything he had taken for granted now slipping through his grasp. He had spent years demanding respect with a badge, but today he learned that real respect isn't given because of authority. It's earned, and he had earned nothing. The crowd didn't forget. They had seen the truth, and soon the world would see it too. The video of the incident would spread, conversations would be had, and for once justice had played out in real time. Because today, power didn't win. Truth did. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And today, someone learned that the hard way. Now, let's hear from you. How would you have reacted in Darius's situation? Do you think the cop deserved to lose his job? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening stories like this. Your support helps bring powerful stories to light, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.